I'm Sarah, 34. My husband, Ethan, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, a comfortable, quiet American city. We've been married for 6 years. We don't have kids, though we tried. There were tests, conversations, doctors, but it all somehow missed the mark. Over time, the desperation subsided, giving way to indifference. Well, so be it, we'll live for ourselves, we thought. But who am I kidding? Our evenings started looking alike. Slippers, a TV show, a cup of tea, and a kiss on the forehead. Sometimes I catch myself missing not a child, but the feelings that made me feel alive, a desired woman. Ethan is kind, faithful, but it's as if someone wiped away a layer of spontaneity from him. And from me, too. One evening, he came home late from work. He was a little agitated and, while reheating dinner, he said, "You know, David, my boss, invited us to his place for the weekend. He says he and his wife want to get to know us better." In New York? I asked. No, he lives in Greenwich, outside of the city. A beautiful home, he said. And his wife, Claire, is supposed to be very outgoing, the life of the party. I smiled. Somehow, I thought that very outgoing might not only be about her personality. Thoughts, as usual, raced ahead. "Well, if you want, let's go," I replied, not suspecting how much that "let's go" would change my life. On Friday morning, we drove out. The road was smooth, and the autumn scenery outside the window felt warm, like a blanket. In the evening, we drove up to the house, 2 stories with ivy winding around the porch. Quite stylish, not pretentious, but tasteful. David himself came out, tall, with well-groomed gray hair, confident. Ethan looked like a student next to a CEO beside him. Behind him was Claire. A woman in a stunning burgundy dress, with high sleeves and a closed collar. It looked modest, but it was so form-fitting that my gaze naturally traced her curves. "Welcome. We've been so looking forward to meeting you," she said with a smile and kissed me on the cheek. Her perfume had notes of lavender and pepper, elusive yet captivating. We were led into the house. The living room had a fireplace and cashmere throws. The table was already set. Homemade antipasto, smoked meats, cheese with walnuts, and, notably, a rich seafood stew. Tonight we decided to start with seafood, but the evening is just beginning, David said mysteriously. After a couple of glasses of wine, the tension eased. We chatted about travel, cooking, and jokes. Claire sat next to me. Her hand sometimes brushed mine, as if by accident. Elbow to elbow, knee to knee. It was soft, but noticeable. And I didn't pull away. On the contrary, I enjoyed feeling her warmth and scent. Maybe too much. After dessert, she suggested, "Do you want to see my dressing room? I have things from Italy and France. I'd like to show you something, Sarah." Slightly tipsy, I nodded. We went upstairs. The dressing room was truly impressive. Dresses on velvet hangers, pointy-toed shoes, and soft lighting, like a boutique. "This," she said, pulling out a dark blue dress with sheer sleeves. "I'd love for you to try it on. Just for fun. You'd look magnificent in it." "Fun?" I asked, feeling a tickle of excitement inside. "Yes," she smiled. "All adults should allow themselves to play sometimes. Don't you agree?" I looked at her, at the dress, at myself in the mirror, and suddenly realized, no one had told me I was beautiful, that I was desired, that they wanted to see me, for a long time. In Claire's eyes was what I lacked even from my own husband. "I'll try it on," I replied. And at that moment, I heard David's voice from downstairs. "Girls, did you get lost up there?" Claire took my hand. "No, we just found what we were looking for." And perhaps, that was the beginning of a completely different reality. The dress felt slightly cool to the touch. The fabric flowed like water. I stood in Claire's dressing room while she deftly zipped up the back. Her every touch was too gentle for simple assistance. When she ran her hand along my waistline, I involuntarily held my breath. "You know," she whispered, adjusting the hem of the dress on my hip, "you're missing just one detail." Here. She opened a small box and took out a velvet garter with a tiny silver charm. Her gaze didn't ask, it affirmed. She knelt before me, lifted the edge of the dress, and put the garter just above my knee. Slowly, luxuriating in the act. My heart pounded. Perfect now. She stood up and met my eyes. Look. I turned to the mirror. A different woman stood there. A woman I had almost forgotten. Alluring, open, ready to be herself. You look good in what you fear, Claire said, gently tucking a strand of my hair. And you know it. Ethan's voice drifted up from downstairs. Sarah, are you there? Is everything okay? I swallowed. Yes, we'll be right down. Claire slowly led me by the hand. Downstairs, in the soft glow of the fireplace, the men were already sitting with their glasses. Ethan froze when he saw me. Not from jealousy, but surprise. I couldn't recall him looking at me like that in the past year. David smiled. Well, now we definitely have an evening in the best tradition. You look gorgeous, Ethan mumbled, and there was something sincerely boyish in it. It's just the dress, I brushed off, sitting on the edge of the sofa. But Claire and I both knew it wasn't about the dress. The wine grew stronger, the words fewer. We played truth or dare. It's a game as old as time, but in that warm, dimly lit living room, it felt dangerously alive. Claire, without batting an eye, admitted that at 25 she fell in love with a married female friend. David confessed that he once took off his wedding ring on a business trip. Ethan reluctantly admitted that he was aroused by women's legs in black stockings. And you, Sarah? Claire asked, looking directly into my eyes. What turns you on? I felt my pulse throbbing in my neck. I remembered how her fingers slid along my leg, how a jolt went down my spine. But a touch, I whispered quietly. Subtle, accidental. The most dangerous kind, Claire agreed. The night slowly turned into silence. Throws, candles, wine glasses. Suddenly David suggested, why don't you stay with us? The guest rooms are ready. Everything's already taken care of. I looked at Ethan. He barely nodded, as if he knew what was coming next. When we were alone, he was silent. I took off the dress, remaining in the garter and thin lingerie. You've changed, he breathed. And you noticed? He came closer, took my face, kissed me like the first time, and grabbed my hips with unexpected determination. That night, Ethan was different, greedy, real. His fingers left marks on my skin. He kissed my stomach, licked the garter, and I didn't resist. I felt like I was burning from the inside. Maybe from the wine, maybe from Claire, or maybe from my former self, who was finally let loose. Towards morning, I went out onto the balcony. Claire was standing there in a sheer robe. How do you feel? Alive. She smirked. This is just the beginning. The main thing is not to get scared when it gets really good. I looked into her eyes, then down at her chest, barely visible through the fabric, and caught myself wanting to touch, but I didn't. Not yet. A week passed after the trip to David and Claire's. Ethan and I returned to our usual rhythm. Work, dinners, rare quiet conversations. Only now, something had shifted between us. He touched me more often, fleetingly but deliberately. I started wearing stockings more often, even if I wasn't planning on taking off my coat. Our glances began to hide something that couldn't be said aloud. Something that happened there, or was supposed to happen. Every evening, I remembered Claire zipping up my dress. Her eyes that seemed to decipher me without words. And the scariest thing was, I wanted to feel it again. Ethan didn't bring up the topic, but one morning at breakfast, he asked if we wanted to host a return visit. I stared into my coffee cup, and he continued. You don't mind, do you? I didn't answer. I just placed my hand on his, and he understood. On Saturday, we prepared meticulously. I chose a dark green fitted dress with a high collar and a thin belt. Stilettos, stockings, long earrings. Ethan wore a shirt without a tie, loose but neat. We both looked like we were going not to a friendly dinner, but to a private premiere. Claire and David arrived a bit later. She was in a white suit with a sheer blouse, no bra underneath. I noticed immediately. It was a challenge and an invitation. David's gaze lingered on my neck a little longer than acceptable. I felt a heat under my skin. The evening passed slowly. We drank wine, played Name That Tune, joked, and laughed. But everyone knew it wasn't really about the tunes. Tension hung in the air. We watched each other as if reading from a closed book. For dessert, Claire brought strawberries and a warm chocolate fountain. Laughing, she dipped a berry and brought it to my lips. "You have a drop here," she said and wiped it off with her finger. Then, with the same finger, she traced her own neck. I felt Ethan tense up next to me. David stood with his arms crossed, watching, as if observing an experiment. "Come on, I'll show you my new mask," Claire said, lightly touching my arm. "A gift from Tbilisi. You have to see it." I stood up. In the bedroom, she took out a black Venetian mask from a box, intricate, with lace and feathers. "Try it on," she whispered. I put it on. She looked at me as if I were a work of art. And at that moment, I didn't doubt I was. "May I?" she asked, and her fingers brushed the button on my dress. I nodded. She unbuttoned the first, then the second. Under the dress, black lace lingerie and garters. She traced my chest with her finger, not touching, but drawing around it. "You are magnificent," she breathed. "Do you want him to see you like this?" "Who?" I whispered hoarsely. "Your husband, or maybe someone else." Her lips were too close to mine. I didn't answer. I couldn't. And she didn't kiss me, she just put her forehead against mine and whispered, "Tonight, you decide." We returned to the living room. The men fell silent. Ethan looked at me with admiration. I felt that he, too, wanted me to decide, for something to happen that would once again tear us out of our routine. David poured everyone another glass. His voice dropped. "We have one night. The choice is yours. But we're not rushing. We are just the backdrop." Claire sat beside me. Her hand again rested on my leg, right on the edge of the stocking, and I didn't move away. For the first time, I realized this game wasn't about cheating, it was about boundaries, about where the acceptable ends and the real begins. The glasses emptied. The music on the speaker changed to something barely audible, almost a whisper. The light softened, grew warmer. Only breathing and glances filled the room. Claire and I sat side by side, the men across from us. No one spoke anymore, but words were unnecessary. Claire leaned toward me and whispered, "I'm going to the bathroom. Do you want to come with me?" I didn't answer, I just stood up and followed her. There was soft light, the scent of ylang ylang, a fluffy towel, a mirror in which I suddenly saw myself as someone else. Not a wife, not a homeowner, a woman. Claire moved closer, touched my neck with her lips. "Are you trembling?" she whispered. "A little. It's not scary. The main thing is not to resist yourself." She unclasped my belt slowly, as if reading each buckle like a poem. The dress slipped off my shoulders. It turned out that my lingerie was the focus of her keen attention today. "You know, in America, they're so afraid of being desired that they turn themselves into walls," she said. "But you?" "No." Her hands were careful, as if she were sculpting me anew. "May I?" she asked and ran her finger along the garter line. I nodded. Claire hugged me from behind, pressed close, and I felt her breath on the back of my neck. It was steady, calm, confident. "We're swapping rooms tonight. You with David, me with Ethan. Do you agree?" I didn't know what to say. But inside, everything screamed, yes. She kissed my neck, then dressed me in a long, sheer peignoir with dark lace, like a mask for the body, and led me to the other bedroom. David was waiting there. He stood up when I entered. He wore a white shirt and dark pajama bottoms. He walked over, slowly took my hand, and looked into my eyes. Do you want this? I don't know. Then let me just be close. Nothing more. He hugged me. His arms were warm and strong. His scent was like fresh wood. I felt my body listen to him before my mind did. He kissed me lightly, undemandingly, but that kiss burned away my doubts. You have amazing shoulders, he whispered. And the smell of your skin, you can feel it. He ran his finger along my collarbone, then lower, over my chest, not touching, just outlining. I stood still, and my breathing grew shallow. He wasn't rushing. On the contrary, he drew out every detail. He sat me on the edge of the bed, knelt down, and kissed my thighs through the thin fabric of the stockings. His hands barely touched the garters. I knew you weren't just a wife, he said. You're a woman who forgot how delicious it is to be desired. I closed my eyes. In my head, Ethan and Claire. What was happening between them now? Was he holding her thigh, was she touching his neck, or more? But at that moment, I felt David's fingers on my waist, and my thoughts scattered. He was attentive, like a master. Nothing rough, nothing vulgar, but everything incredibly sensual. At one point, he laid me on the bed, lay down beside me, fully clothed, just breathing in unison. And we lay there in silence, but with bodies and emotions fully engaged. Do you want me to stay next to you until morning? He asked. Yes. No rush. Everything is still ahead. We fell asleep side by side, clothed, but I felt the barrier of the clothing between us didn't hinder, it only intensified the anticipation. Everything important was still to come. But the first step had been taken. The morning was almost unreal. Soft light filtered through the curtains, and I felt David breathing beside me, as if trying not to disturb the silence. We didn't make love. But something inside me seemed to have changed finally and irrevocably. He was the first to get out of bed. I'll make coffee, he said with a smile, not even asking how I felt. As if he knew I was okay. And I truly was almost. I stayed in bed. Staring at the ceiling, I wondered, and Ethan? He knew I spent the night in a room with another man. What did he feel? Power, jealousy, freedom. When I went down to the kitchen, I saw Claire in one of her luxurious house robes, barefoot with a mug in her hand. Ethan was sitting at the table. He looked relaxed, as if he had just returned from vacation, not from a room with another woman. Good morning, gorgeous, Claire said, winking. I said nothing. Ethan looked at me, stood up, and approached. How are you? I looked him in the eyes. He didn't look away. I don't know, I answered honestly. He nodded, as if accepting this as the new normal. We were already far past the line where a yes or a no mattered. After a late breakfast, David and Claire got ready to leave. The farewell was strangely warm, without awkwardness, without formality. As if we were not four ordinary people, but participants in one large, important experiment. 2 weeks passed. Everything seemed as before. Ethan went to work. I worked on projects at home. On weekends, we went to the woods outside the city or to farmers' markets. But under all this external stability, something new was bubbling. Ethan was different, more attentive, tender, but his affection now contained not only attachment but also something akin to rivalry. I also changed, less reserved, more direct, as if someone had switched my body to a different mode. One evening, Ethan said, I often dream about Claire. Is that bad? I looked at him. Is it pleasant in the dream? Yes. Then it's not bad, but it is dangerous. He nodded, lowering his eyes. And you? I dream that I put on that mask, and it's not me under it anymore. We both fell silent. Thoughts, feelings, and fears twisted into a knot that was impossible to untie. Only to cut. But no one dared. On Sunday, I received a text from Claire. You haven't forgotten the taste of strawberries and chocolate, have you, Sarah? We're having dinner Saturday. No obligations, but with open eyes.
Will you come? I read it 5 times. Should I show Ethan or not?
He'd walk over and see it himself. He was already part of all this.
That evening, as if by accident, he asked, "Did they text us?" I answered, "Yes." "And?" "I don't know."
He walked up to me, pinned me against the wall.
Not roughly, but confidently.
His hand rested on my neck, and his gaze was steady, like a man who knows what he wants.
"Do you want to?"
I flinched. Pulse in my ears, breath in my throat, desire in my stomach.
"I want to, but I'm afraid." "Then let's be afraid together."
On Saturday, we stood at the doorstep of their house. Everything looked as before, but inside, it was different, because this time we were going not to observe, but to participate. When the door opened, Claire stood there in a floor-length dress with long sleeves.
The fabric clung tightly to her body.
Only her eyes were open.
The rest was a mystery.
David stood behind her in a black shirt. He looked at us without a smile, only with expectation.
"Welcome. Tonight, things will be a little different," Claire said. I looked at Ethan. He exhaled. "We're ready." And at that moment, behind her, I noticed a fifth shadow, one that hadn't been there before.